If you ever want to feel like the human equivalent of a spare tire, just grow up in a family where your cousin is a pre-med golden boy and you love engines. I'm not kidding. My name's Austin, and in my family, that meant I had exactly 3 options growing up: become a doctor like Cousin Noah, pretend I wanted to become a doctor like Cousin Noah, or get used to being the side character in every Thanksgiving story. Guess which one I picked? Yeah. The wrong one, according to them. I grew up in Joliet, Illinois. Our family wasn't rich, but they acted like we were one catered party away from appearing in Forbes. My parents, Uncle Mitch and Aunt Lydia, the whole gang, were obsessed with appearances. Suits, careers, who got what for Christmas kind of people. Every success had to come with a photo, a caption, and ideally, a humble brag in the family group chat. So when Cousin Noah got into medical school, you would have thought the Pope himself hand-delivered the acceptance letter. They threw a garden party. Catered, of course. Gifted him a Rolex. An actual Rolex. I had to Google it to check if it was real. It was $9,000, and my mom whispered like it was a smart investment for a man of his caliber. Meanwhile, I was finishing up my 2-year program in automotive technology, working nights at a garage just to pay rent and tuition. No one threw me a party. No surprise there. But I figured I'd at least get a congrats, or a handshake, or something that didn't feel like a participation trophy from a pity parade. Nope. When I told them I got my mechanics degree, my mom blinked like I told her I just bought a yacht in Arizona. My dad chuckled, leaned back, and said, "Oh, so you'll be fixing rusty buckets now, huh?" Rusty buckets. Noah got a Rolex. I got corrosion humor and a pat on the back like I just passed kindergarten. Now I've got a decent sense of humor. I've been teased my whole life for being the hands-on one. In high school, I'd built a go-kart from junk parts and got suspended for accidentally smoking out the entire back lot. When I was 16, I rebuilt a transmission from scratch for a neighbor's busted van. No manual, just instinct. My mom called it cute. My dad said I was too smart to be crawling under cars for the rest of my life. But I liked crawling under cars. They didn't get that. To them, anything with oil and bolts was beneath the family standard. Unless, of course, it was Noah's car, which, funny enough, I'd fixed twice for free. But I digress. The graduation party I got was dinner at Chili's. Mom wore heels like she was attending a gala, and Dad spent the evening talking about Noah's shadowing program at some big hospital in Chicago. "So, what's next?" my aunt asked, sipping a mojito like she was hosting an interview. "I've actually got a few clients already," I said. "Neighbors, friends from school. I'm thinking of renting a garage and going solo." She blinked. "You mean like a real business?" "Yes," I smiled. "With tools and everything." Dad laughed. "Just don't call it Rusty Buckets and Company." I smiled politely. Inside, I was boiling. Not because they didn't believe in me. I gave up on that years ago. But because they were so smug about it. Like my future was some ironic punchline, a lesser version of success, with fewer digits, fewer suits, and apparently more tetanus. I went home that night to my tiny studio apartment above a nail salon. It smelled like acetone and broken dreams. But it was mine. And the next morning, I got up at 6 a.m., put on my coveralls, and got to work under a client's Honda, one with an actual rust problem. I didn't complain. Because under that car, I felt something I hadn't felt all night at Chili's. Pride. They didn't see it yet. They thought I was small time. A stopgap. Someone who'd beg for approval later, when the world proved them right. But I wasn't planning to stay in their world. I was planning to build my own. And turns out, the universe was about to give me one hell of a wrench to throw in their script, because the garage I'd just signed a lease on. It had enough room for 2 lifts, a waiting room, and poetic justice on wheels. Signing the lease on the garage felt like proposing to myself, and saying yes. It was this dusty corner unit on 4th and Bridgeview, right across from a Dollar Tree and sandwiched between a vape shop and an empty laundromat. The paint peeled. The bathroom door creaked like a horror movie, and the ceiling fans rattled like they were sponsored by anxiety. But I loved it. There was something raw about that place. Honest. Like it had been waiting for someone who didn't flinch at rust or sweat or engine oil on clean jeans. I paid the deposit with every cent I'd saved over 2 years of night shifts. No loans, no help, no generational wealth, parachute. Just 73-hour weeks, burnt fingers, and a spreadsheet that made my accountant friend physically gag. While Noah was posting filtered Instagram stories from clinical labs with captions like, "Future surgeon loading brain," I was mopping brake fluid off a cracked floor and repainting the closed sign from the last tenant. But you know what? My shop, Precision Pit, opened 2 weeks later with a folding table as a front desk, a refurbished coffee maker, and 3 very loyal clients, Mrs. Applegate from the nail salon, my old high school janitor, and a guy named Marcus who drove a '98 Ford that backfired like it had unresolved trauma. I'd never felt richer. Meanwhile, family chat was thriving. Every day, Noah updates. "White coat fitting today. Practice stitching on synthetic skin. Quick bite with my study group stethoscope red heart #FutureMedSquad." Me? I posted once. Just a photo of the new Precision Pit logo I painted on the garage door. Nothing flashy. Not a single like. Actually, scratch that, my barber liked it. That man has been emotionally available to me since sophomore year, and I trust him more than anyone else in that chat. No one else responded. Not even my parents. Which, honestly, stung more than I expected. Not because I needed their approval. I was way past that. But some small, desperate corner of me still wanted my dad to say, "Proud of you, kid." Even just once. He didn't. Instead, he texted, "You're still doing that garage thing? Might be time to consider going back to school." Yeah. School. Because clearly ambition only counts if it comes with a white coat or a 6-figure debt. At this point, I could have snapped. Could have written some long rant about how not all success comes in a Rolex box, or how fixing someone's car so they can drive to work is just as important as performing surgery. But instead, I just sent a thumbs up emoji. Greasy glove and all. Over the next few weeks, I kept grinding. Word spread fast. Marcus sent his cousin. The janitor sent 2 teachers. One of them brought a battered Corolla that coughed more than it drove, and said, "Everyone in town says you're the kid who doesn't BS people." I smiled, nodded, and gave her a discount. Because here's the thing. I wasn't just building a shop. I was building a name. And in a town where everyone talks, that's more valuable than any Rolex. One afternoon, while I was elbow deep in a timing belt replacement, my mom called. Not to ask how I was. Just to ask if I could check something on her car during dinner next week. "Dinner?" I asked. "Yeah, for Noah. He's visiting before he starts rotations." "Ah. Of course." I asked. "Is it just for him?" Long pause. "Well, I mean, we figured you'd come by too. You know, be helpful." There it was. Be helpful. Not be celebrated. Not be acknowledged. Be useful. A tool. And you know what I said? I said sure. I accepted the invite with all the warmth of a cold radiator. Not because I wanted to go, but because something in my gut told me I should. Not for them. For the story. Because that dinner? That was going to be the prelude to something they didn't see coming. And it had 4 wheels, a busted muffler, and the exact kind of rust my dad used to mock. The night of the dinner, I showed up in my cleanest flannel and boots that didn't squeak, small miracles. The dining room looked like it had been professionally staged for a Hallmark commercial, candles flickering, wine glasses polished, and Cousin Noah sitting at the head of the table like he was one internship away from being knighted. He wore that white coat. Not even joking. The man wore his white coat to a family dinner. "It's ceremonial," he said, as if that explained anything. Aunt Lydia practically fanned herself every time he spoke. My uncle smiled like a proud manager showing off his Employee of the Month plaque. My mom kept repositioning the salad bowl just to make the table look more balanced in the photos. And me? I sat 3 seats down, next to the coat closet. Fitting. When I walked in, Dad greeted me with a raised eyebrow and the words, "You didn't have grease on your hands, did you?" I didn't even reply. Just smiled and held up my napkin. Meanwhile, Noah was mid-story about how he held a retractor during a real appendectomy. Everyone gasped like he just saved a bus full of orphans. Someone even clapped. I chewed my overcooked chicken and stared at the centerpiece. My cousin said, "Retractor," like it was a flex. I use a retractor too. It's called a breaker bar. One just gets Instagram comments. The other actually keeps people driving to work. Halfway through dessert, a dry chocolate cake that tasted like dusty ambition, my mom cleared her throat. "Sweetheart," she said to Noah, "we still need to get your car in for service before you leave." The check engine light came on again. "Oh," Noah waved it off. "It always does that. I think it's emotional." They all laughed. Except me. Then she turned to me. "Austin, would you mind taking a look? Just something quick. You're good with tools, right?" I blinked. Let me get this straight, I was good with tools. Now? Not fixing rusty buckets anymore? I smiled. "Of course, Mom. I'd be happy to look at it." Noah threw me the keys like I was a valet. I caught them without blinking. It was a 14 Camry that sounded like it had survived a street fight with a shopping cart. I slid into the seat, turned the key, and instantly recognized the shudder. Transmission misfire. Possibly the torque converter. He'd been driving it like that for weeks. "Back inside," I said. "I can take care of it this week. Bring it by the shop." "The shop?" my aunt asked, like I just mentioned a speakeasy. "Yeah," I said casually. "I opened my own garage." Silence. My dad coughed. My mom blinked twice. "That's new," my uncle said. "It's called Precision Pit," I added, slowly buttering my roll. "Got a lift, waiting room, snacks. The good stuff." Aunt Lydia forced a smile. "That's cute." Cute. Like I'd opened a lemonade stand with air fresheners. I let it slide. Because the truth? They weren't ready. They had no idea that in 2 weeks, that very car, Noah's precious Camry, would roll into my shop with a busted undercarriage. And my dad would be the one behind the wheel. Not Noah. Not to celebrate. But because they had no other choice. See, turns out when the universe wants to serve karma, it does it with just enough rust for poetic flavor. The following Tuesday, Noah dropped off the Camry. He parked like someone who'd only ever driven a golf cart, hopped out, and looked around like he expected valet service. "Didn't know you'd actually gone through with this," he said, eyes scanning the garage like it was a weird art installation. "Thought it was like a side thing." I motioned toward the sign painted in bright white across the overhead door, "Precision Pit Automotive, honest work. Clean hands?" "Okay, sometimes." He raised an eyebrow. "That's your slogan?" I shrugged. "Better than I held a retractor once." He didn't laugh. Instead, he pointed at the waiting room window and said, "You got snacks?" "Better. Free coffee and a vending machine. The peanuts aren't expired this week." He chuckled, clearly unsure if I was joking. I wasn't. He handed over the keys, told me to text when it's done, and walked out like he just tolerated a field trip. The Camry's issue was even worse than I'd thought. Cracked mounts, misfiring solenoids. One of the tires had steel wires peeking out like angry little mustaches. I took photos of everything, made a quote, and sent it over with a detailed write-up that would have made a dealership blush. Noah replied 2 hours later. "Wow, lol. Are you sure it's not just the light being weird? Dad might stop by. His car's acting up too." And just like that, destiny revved its engine. The next morning, I was replacing a gasket when I heard the cough of an engine that sounded like a smoker with asthma. I peered out the bay doors and nearly dropped my wrench. It was the car. My dad's old '02 Buick Century. Beige. Rust creeping up the rear wheel wells. a crack in the windshield shaped like a lightning bolt, and a bumper sticker that read, "Still plays with cars," which was ironic because the car had clearly lost every game it played. I wiped my hands and walked out front just as Dad stepped out, squinting like he was inspecting a crime scene. "Well," he said, arms crossed, "this is bigger than I thought." "The rust?" I asked, poker-faced. "No. The whole thing." "You really run this place?" "Rent, licenses, inspections. All me." He nodded slowly. I waited. Maybe for an apology. Or a reluctant good for you. What I got instead was, "The engine's knocking. And the heater won't blow. Think you can take a look?" "Not, would you mind?" "Not, can I book a time?" "Just think you can take a look?" I smiled. "Sure. Want me to tow it, or will it make it the 30 feet to the lift?" He didn't laugh. Once the car was inside, I popped the hood. Immediately, I could tell it had been neglected like a houseplant in a college dorm. Worn belts, cracked hoses, leaking oil pan. And of course, rust. More rust than metal in some spots. I called him over. "This," I pointed, "is what happens when you treat a car like a disposable camera." He raised an eyebrow. "See here?" I tapped the rust. "Rusty bucket." His eyes narrowed. "Ironic, huh?" He didn't answer. Just scratched his chin and mumbled something about budget options. I handed him a clipboard with the estimate, a very fair one, mind you, and waited. He stared at the number, blinked, then finally looked up. "You charging family full price now?" I didn't flinch. I just said, "Did you bring that Rolex when Noah fixed your gallbladder?" He didn't answer. Just muttered, "Do what you can," and shuffled to the waiting area. And there he sat, in a plastic chair under a framed sign that read, "Respect the work, or walk to work." Oh, the poetry. The very man who once called my dream a rusty joke was now sitting in a garage he didn't believe in, waiting for his rust bucket to be resurrected, by the same hands he dismissed for years. And I wasn't even done yet. Because karma? She had one more gear to shift. Working on my dad's Buick was like operating on a dinosaur with arthritis. Half the bolts were so rusted I had to use heat just to break them loose, and every hose felt like it might turn to dust if I breathed wrong. The inside was a time capsule too, old fast food receipts, a warped stick CD, and a stale car air freshener shaped like a pine tree but smelled like regret. I wasn't rushing. Not out of spite, okay, maybe a little, but mostly because I wanted the job done right. This was my work. My space. My reputation. Meanwhile, Dad sat stiffly in the waiting room, pretending he wasn't reading every label on every bottle of tire shine I had on display. He looked so out of place, hunched in a plastic chair, flanked by my laminated customer policies and a vintage Route 66 poster. Every once in a while, I caught him glancing into the bay. Not saying anything. Just watching. I could practically hear the thoughts rattling in his head. This is real. This isn't a phase. This is a business. Part of me wanted to scream, "Yeah, Dad. Told you." But I kept my mouth shut. There was something sweeter about letting the silence do the talking. That's when the bell above the door dinged. I turned, and in walked Mr. Randall, the owner of Randall Heating and Electric, aka the man with a fleet of work trucks and a reputation for hiring local. I wiped my hands and stepped out to meet him. "Mr. Randall?" I grinned. He looked around, nodding in approval. "Heard from Mike down at the trade school that a former student opened up shop. Didn't realize it was you, Austin." "Yup. Just hit our 3rd month. Place looks solid. Organized. Smells like real work happens here." I laughed. "We try to keep the drama low and the torque high." He smiled and extended a business card. "I've got 7 trucks due for inspection next month. You think you can handle it?" Behind him, I saw my dad subtly lean forward in his chair. "I've got the space, the tools, and the coffee's free," I said. "We can even do staggered scheduling so you're never short a truck." Randall clapped me on the shoulder. "That's what I like to hear. Let's start with 2 next week, see how it goes." I agreed, and we shook on it, right there, in full view of the man who once said, "No one makes a real living changing tires." My dad's eyes followed the handshake like he'd just watched someone pass me a crown. He didn't say anything, but I could see his mouth twitch, just slightly. That twitch he always got when he didn't know how to feel, half doubt, half disbelief. Back in the bay, I finished the Camry next. Noah's car was a mess in its own charming way. The sensors were fighting each other, the brakes were worn thin, and the engine was thirstier than a TikTok influencer on launch day. I fixed everything. Even detailed it, not because I had to, but because I wanted to send a message without saying a word. I left a note in the center console. Engine's good to go. Check lights off. Just like med school, upkeep is everything. That night, my dad picked up the Buick. No fanfare. No jokes. He looked at the car, then at me, and finally said, "You really built all this?" I nodded. Every inch. He rubbed his chin, then gave the briefest, smallest nod imaginable. "That's something." He turned to walk away. But before he stepped outside, he paused. "You know, your Uncle Mitch paid triple for a new radiator last month. Should have come to you." And then he left. That was it. Not "I'm proud of you." Not "sorry I doubted you." But they should have come to you. And somehow, that one sentence? It tasted better than a Rolex. 3 days later, I was replacing brake pads on a Silverado when my phone went off like someone had thrown it into a blender. 6 texts in 2 minutes, Mom, then Dad, then Noah, rapid fire. At first, I thought someone died. Then I saw Noah's text. Camry stalled. Won't start. Stuck near Greenvale. Help. 2 minutes later from Mom. We're going to get the car. Can we bring it to you ASAP? And then Dad. Something's wrong. Check engine again. We're bringing it in. Don't make this worse. That last line? Don't make this worse? Like I had done something wrong by existing within 20 feet of a faulty Camry. I took a breath, set down the brake caliper, and smiled. Because something in my gut whispered, this is it. 2 hours later, a tow truck rumbled into the lot and dropped Noah's car like a crime scene at my front door. Except this time, it wasn't Noah who stepped out. It was my parents. Dad looked irritated. Mom looked tight-lipped, the way she did when she was about to suggest something that wasn't really optional. The car rolled into the bay, and I approached, clipboard in hand like I hadn't been waiting for this exact moment since the family dinner. Engine light came on again? I asked, already knowing the answer. Dad gave a tight nod. Stalled twice. Rattling sound. Something you didn't fix right the first time, maybe? I raised a brow. You think I botched the job? I didn't say that, he replied, with the tone of someone who definitely just said that. Mom added, Noah mentioned he heard a weird noise and opened the hood yesterday. I froze. Did he touch anything? She hesitated. Just check the oil. Maybe. I opened the hood. And there it was, my golden ticket. The oil cap was missing. Not lost, just chilling behind the engine block like it had fled the scene of a crime. Oil had splattered across the inside, soaking wires and pooling on the intake. It looked like a fast food fryer exploded under there. I turned to them. This, I pointed calmly, is what happens when someone opens something they don't understand. Dad frowned. You saying it's his fault? I'm saying, I said slowly, that when someone removes an oil cap and doesn't put it back on, things get messy. They stared. Silent. I gave them a second. Maybe they'd connect the dots. Apologize. Admit something. Anything. But no. Mom crossed her arms. So, can you fix it? There it was. The line. Delivered without irony, without reflection, just as casual and dismissive as it had always been. And so, I leaned against the hood, wiped my hands on the rag, and let the words flow out like a perfectly tuned engine. Of course, I said smoothly. After all, I fix rusty buckets, right? Dead silence. Mom blinked. Once. Twice. Dad actually flinched. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, maybe defend the joke from weeks ago. But nothing came out. He just stood there, caught in the fumes of his own hypocrisy. I didn't smile. I didn't raise my voice. I just turned back toward the workbench and grabbed the estimate form. Gonna need a new cap, I said, writing. Clean up, inspection, oil flush. Probably some connector replacement if the oil hit the sensors. All labor included. I handed it over. Dad looked at the number. Not outrageous, but definitely not free. You charging us full price? He asked, cautious. I shrugged. Unless you brought a Rolex this time. Mom shot him a look. He said nothing. I walked away as they signed the form. Inside, I glanced at my own reflection in the shop's glass door. Same grease-stained shirt. Same busted boots. Same kid they once rolled their eyes at. But now they were the ones waiting in silence, hoping I'd fix what they couldn't. And that felt better than any apology ever could. They waited in the shop lobby longer than any walk-in customer ever had. The TV on the wall played a rerun of Wheel of Fortune, and I could hear Mom fake laughing at the contestants' mispronunciation of bouquet. Dad sat stiff as a bolt in winter, scrolling through his phone like it owed him money. Neither of them looked comfortable. Neither of them said a word when I walked past with a wrench in one hand and their broken oil cap in the other. Finally, when the job was done, I walked back into the waiting room and handed over the keys. All good, I said simply. Oil flushed. Cap replaced. Sensors cleaned. Engine run fine now, assuming nobody pops the hood for fun. Mom took the keys but didn't move. She fiddled with them. Then looked up. You know, she started, doing that thing where she softened her voice as if we were about to talk about puppies instead of years of emotional whiplash. We've always wanted the best for you. I stared at her. That phrase again. The all-purpose band-aid for everything from guilt to gaslighting. Dad chimed in, his tone measured. And we never said you weren't capable. We thought maybe your potential was somewhere else. Like not under a hood, I replied flatly. He looked away. Mom leaned forward in her chair, elbows on knees like this was suddenly a therapy session. Austin, you've built something incredible here. Really. We didn't expect it to become this. I nodded. No, you didn't. She blinked. You expected I'd flake out. Patch tires in an alley. Live paycheck to paycheck. Probably call Noah to borrow gas money. No, we didn't. Yes, you did. I cut in, calm but sharp. It's why I didn't get a graduation dinner. It's why nobody replied to the shop opening invite. It's why I was the rusty bucket guy while Noah got a Rolex and 2 toasts. The air thickened. Dad spoke again, quieter. You have to understand, we were scared. Scared you'd get stuck doing something that wouldn't take you far. Funny, I said. Because this place has taken me farther than your approval ever did. Mom's eyes welled up just slightly, but she blinked it away. We are proud of you, she said. I gave a soft smile. I know. Now that there's proof. Now that it's polished floors and a client list and invoices with 4 figures. But where was that pride when I was in the garage with frozen fingers, teaching myself diagnostics off YouTube at 1 a.m.? They didn't respond. So I went on. I'm not angry, I added, and I meant it. But I'm not going to sit here and let you rewrite the story either. I know how it went. And now I know who I am, because I did it without the claps, without the speeches, and definitely without the Rolex. Dad rubbed the back of his neck. Mom stared at the floor. It wasn't cruel. It was just honest. After a pause, Dad muttered, So what now? I took a breath. You need a mechanic, I'm here. You need family? You'll have to meet me halfway, and not at Noah's party. That landed. They stood slowly. Mom looked around the shop again like she was seeing it, really seeing it, for the first time. You really built all this? She whispered. Every inch. They walked out quietly, no dramatic exits, no final jabs. Just the sound of the door closing. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel overlooked. I just felt steady. And that was enough. It was late when they left. The kind of quiet that only settles after long days and longer silences. The hum of the shop lights was the only sound left, steady, low, like a heartbeat for a place that finally felt like mine. I locked the front door, turned the open sign to close, and walked the floor one last time. Every wrench had its place. Every tool had a home. The air smelled like rubber and motor oil, and somehow peace. I paused at the front desk where my appointment calendar sat, already booked for next week. Randall's Fleet. A couple walk-ins. A regular named Joanne who brought her old Chevy in every month just so she could chat about dogs while I rotated her tires. This place wasn't just a garage. It was proof. Proof that work mattered. That doing something with your hands didn't mean you had no brain, or no future. That you didn't need a white coat to be proud of the mirror. That success didn't always come with champagne and applause, sometimes it just came with clean receipts and a satisfied engine. I used to wonder if I was overreacting. Maybe they weren't as dismissive as I remembered. Maybe I just took things too personally. But that dinner? That rusty bucket joke? That moment stayed with me. And I'm glad it did. Because it pushed me harder. Not for revenge, but for clarity. They'd given the Rolex to Noah because he was their version of success. Their dream. Their white coat. That's fine. Let them have their dreams. I built mine. With grit. With calloused hands. With a socket wrench and a vision nobody else believed in. As I turned off the lights, I passed the shop mirror near the entrance. Caught my reflection. Oil-streaked cheek. Rolled up sleeves. Steel-toe boots. Same guy they once underestimated. But now, I smiled. Now, when people ask what I do, I just say, I fix things. And if they look confused, I clarify. Rusty buckets, mostly. But sometimes, people, too. Then I lock the door. And I go home.